maybe we could start very simply by just saying, how would you define power in terms of its functional definition, like in interpersonal relations? And then why do you think power is so essential to all relationships? That's really what I'd like to get to. Why is it so essential? Why couldn't it be something else?
Well, the way I define power is I try and take it away from that kind of negative context that most people have and that you brought up. And I bring it to something very primitive and very primal. The way the human being is wired, the feeling that we have no control over our environment, and in the earliest period, it was literally over our environment and wild animals and nature and the climate, etc. But now the sense that you have no control over your career, over your children, over your parents, is deeply, deeply immiserating. And it compels us to act in certain ways, either attempts to find positive ways of power or doing what you call covert ways of getting power, passive-aggressive, traditionally passive-aggressive means. So it's deeply wired in us to want a degree of control over the immediate environment and immediate events. We can never have complete control, and the idea of having complete control is nonsense, and it would actually be very ugly because you want a degree of letting go and letting circumstances come to you, et cetera, et cetera. So the sense of you want to feel like with other people and relationships that you can influence them, that you can move them in a certain direction, either to get you to love you and treat you better, or either to stop annoying, irritating behaviors, or either to, wake up and find and do productive activity if it's your children, et cetera. You want to have the ability to influence people, to move them in a certain direction, either in your interest or in their interest, right? And once you have that need, and every single human being ever who's ever lived has that need, and we often don't recognize it because we're embarrassed by it. We're embarrassed by our desire for power, for our need to control. Every human being has it, right? And it's not easy because human beings are complicated. They don't, if you say, do this, and you're talking to your son, he'll do the opposite, or he'll do something else. You can't just force people in a direction, right? By being overt and telling them this is what you need to do, you create resentment, you create an enemy. They may say, yes, daddy, yes, husband, I'll do what you say, but they're going to resist you deep down inside, right? So people are tricky. They wear masks. They pretend to say one thing and they do another. They have their egos, and you inadvertently wound their egos or trip them in some way, and they react in a way that you don't expect. And so power is this kind of invisible realm that envelops society where people are continually battling each other and struggling in it, but no one is like talking about it. No one's being overt about it. No one's saying, this is exactly what I'm trying to do. And so when you enter the social world and the career world, you're not expecting these battles. You don't know, no one's taught you, no one's trained you. Your parents don't train you. Nobody trains you. And you make mistakes, and you realize how political people are. If you're a sharky character, and there's a certain percentage of them, you realize, wow, I can deceive people, I can manipulate them, I can get what I want, I can pretend to love them, and they'll fall for me, and I can do all this other stuff. But
Robert Greene says there is an invisible force running every single relationship you're in, and almost nobody is willing to admit they feel it. He says the app on your phone right now is engineered to steal the exact energy you need for your own purpose. He says the difference between people who become successful and people who don't comes down to how they handle one specific emotion, and after a stroke nearly killed him, Robert Greene says he learned a strategy from a 2,500-year-old Chinese general that explains why comfortable people never change. Let's watch and discover.
From this, because I think because people just need to see themselves through a different lens and realize this is distracting me from who I'm supposed to be.
Well, a lot of what modern life should involve is the ability to ignore certain things. So, for instance, I don't know if you know that app Nextdoor.
Oh, right. I used to have it. But then I'd see all the packages being stolen off my neighbors' porches in Oakland. And then I started enjoying living in Oakland less. And I love the city of Oakland. It's got its problems. It definitely has its problems. But as an East Bay kid, and went to school out there, and, I have deep love for the East Bay. And it's always had those problems. But when you see stuff being stolen on your phone in the middle of the night when you wake up, it creates a sense that like they're out to get my stuff.
Right.
It's terrible.
Right. And so I have it in my spam filter, but I look at it, and every headline is people stealing, somebody broke into somebody's house, this dog bit me, this rabid dog going around, there's this homeless person that's yelling and attacking people, on and on and on. I feel like I'm living in this neighborhood. It's like Beirut or something in the 1980s. I can't even walk out my door. I don't look at next door anymore. I just ignore it. I don't open it ever. Because I know that they're designed algorithmically to put that in front of you every single time so that you click on it, because we respond to that kind of stuff naturally. We can't help it. So you have to be able to shut that stuff up and look at what you can actually control in your life. So I have this visceral dislike of what's going on in Ukraine, because I was in Ukraine recently and I feel I've identified very strongly with their struggle, right? And I can't, that outrage feeling, it just, every time I read an article about it, it just drives me crazy. So the only thing is I stop reading as much as I can. I read things that are kind of rational and intelligent, and I send them money, and I donate as much as I can, and I help them practically. But I don't allow myself to get that kind of outraged feeling all of the time. So somebody has to write a book, somebody has to instruct us in what to ignore and what to actually pay attention to. So there are things that you can control, injustices that are out there that you could control by voting, by amassing a movement, by dealing with climate change, not by trying to recycle every little thing in your house, but actually doing something really much more macro in the world, joining a cause. There are things you can do, and that's positive, and that's a way of channeling that kind of dark energy in you for a positive purpose. But it's totally disruptive, and it totally distracts you and weakens you and drains you of energy to fall into those rabbit holes and let yourself fall into them. So you have to learn the art of what to ignore and what not to pay attention to, and understand that you're wired to see those kind of red alert buttons on Facebook or on Nextdoor or wherever they are. And it's negative. It's like a candy rush, and you have to avoid it.
And it's taking us away from our purpose, which we each have. I mean, I think to me that's the most deleterious aspect of it.
Unless your purpose is to organize and be an activist. People ask me, I wrote a lot about, in my Human Nature book, about the shadow side of human nature. Right? And we all have it. We all have a dark side. We all have hidden aggression. We all have feelings of envy. We all have feelings of grandiosity. We all have aggressive impulses. How do you deal with it? And I say the way to deal is to channel it into something positive and pro-social. And that can be putting it in your artwork, venting that anger and that outrage in something that people kind of can identify with. Or it can be in organizing something. That could be your purpose in life, in actually doing something positive. So that's the only...
Robert Greene, author of The 48 Laws of Power, The Laws of Human Nature, and Mastery, sat down with Andrew Huberman for over 3 hours. And the very first idea he wanted to correct was what most people get wrong about the word power itself. Not manipulation, not domination. Greene defines power as something far more uncomfortable. A primitive, deeply wired need for control over your environment that exists in every single relationship you have, whether you admit it or not. Greene's exact framing, every career, every mentorship, every romantic relationship runs on an exchange of power. There are yeses and there are nos, there are overt contracts and covert contracts. The overt contract is the one you say out loud, I'll do this because I want to. You'll do that because you want to. The covert contract is the one nobody says out loud, I don't feel safe. So I'll take something from this interaction you're not even aware I'm taking.
Your own lens. So someday, it's a book stirring in me, is the art of thinking and how to use that kind of process and go deeper into it. And I talked a lot about it in one of my podcasts, which might be the seed of a book. But it's the difference between dead thinking and alive thinking. Ideas can be either alive or they can be dead. And an alive idea is something that enters your brain from an external source, a philosopher, an article, somebody you admire, somebody you hate, and then you absorb it and you think about it and you decide, I'm going to turn it around into this, and I'm going to make it alive, and it's going to make it something that's part of me. Another part of an alive idea is you have an idea that comes to you about a book or a project or something about the world, and you go, maybe that's not actually true. Maybe the opposite is true. And you go through a process and you cycle through it on and on, and you reflect on it and you refine this idea. And maybe it turns into its opposite. And through the process of reflecting and correcting and revising it, you turn it into something living, something alive within you, right? On and on and on. And what prevents people from going through that process, which would be the subject of my book, is basically anxiety. Because I think how you handle anxiety is the most important kind of quality in life. It'll determine whether you will be successful, whether you will find your career path, or whether you won't be able to. I don't know if you can follow that idea at all. But anxiety is a signal to you that you don't understand something, that there's a problem out there that you can't resolve. And so what happens to most people if you're insecure is you glom onto something instant and easy to get rid of your feeling of anxiety. I don't understand this problem. Oh, it must be A. A must be the answer because this person said that, right? And so you don't develop the ability to think. You don't develop the ability to go to the next level. But if you take that anxiety and you go, all right, maybe A is an answer. And then you start going through A and then you go, no, maybe A isn't the answer. Maybe B is the answer. You're able to surmount your anxiety and go past it, come further and further and further. You don't rush for the first available answer that's out there, right? You're able to go through a process of refining things. And so in your career, if you're anxious for success, if you're anxious for money, you're going to make the wrong choices. But if you're able to deal with that anxiety and say, maybe I have to think more deeply about where I'm going, I have to come up with other alternatives, then you're going to make a much better choice, on and on and on. So if you're a creative person, it's very, very challenging to have that blank piece of paper before you, that book that you haven't written, that film or whatever. You're filled with a lot of anxiety, and you have to deal with it. And if you're able to turn it into something creative and productive, then great things will happen. You'll create a masterpiece. So the ability to deal with anxiety and to not give in to the most instant gratification that you can get is, to me, a marker of somebody who will be creative and will invent something, as opposed to people who just recycle old and dead ideas.
Amen to that. I was once told that, anxiety.
Greene's point isn't that this makes you manipulative, it makes you human. Every person who has ever lived has this need, and the only people who get hurt by it are the ones who refuse to admit it exists. Let's watch. The second idea Greene brought to the table has nothing to do with ancient strategy and everything to do with the phone in your pocket. He used a neighborhood app called Nextdoor as his example, an app he eventually had to stop opening entirely because every single headline was engineered to make him feel like his neighborhood, a place he genuinely loves, was under siege. They're designed algorithmically to put that in front of you every single time, he says, because we respond to that kind of stuff naturally. We can't help it. Greene's answer isn't to disengage from the world. He talks about donating money and staying informed on causes he genuinely cares about, like the war in Ukraine. His answer is a specific discipline he calls the art of what to ignore, recognizing the difference between outrage that has somewhere productive to go and outrage that is simply a candy rush, as he puts it.
Dying, literally. So reading books about near-death experiences, because that's a lot of what a big part of my next book. God, it's fascinating. There's so many interesting things to go in because it teaches us so much.
Well, I'm so glad, A, you survived your stroke. B, that your mental faculties.
You're not more grateful than I am, I can tell you.
I probably not, but still very grateful. So there, it just illustrates how grateful you must be. B, that you've maintained, if not grown, your mental faculties. I mean, you seem extremely sharp. I promise you, you're not missing a beat. One always wonders, right? Actually, one of the most common fears people have is that somehow they're losing their mind or their memory, and they aren't aware of it. You hear, I have family members who have asked that if they ever start to exhibit signs of severe dementia, that I, put an end to them, which I won't. That's not my place in this world. But I think it's a common fear among people. But you're still extremely sharp, and thank goodness for it. And you mentioned that while you've lost certain abilities, that new appreciation and new abilities have surfaced. Could you perhaps share what some of those are and what they mean to you? Because I think that when one hears about somebody having a stroke, we tend to focus on what's lacking, but clearly this has been a transformative experience also in positive ways.
Well, I had to confront some of my own demons. I had to confront the sense that I expected things out of life, and they're taken away, and I'm kind of ungrateful for being alive, and here I'm pissed off that it takes me 10 minutes to tie my shoes, and I can't really button my shirt. I had to learn what really matters and to have patience and stuff. The other thing was, I used to love hiking. I was very physically active, and I'm sitting at my window in my office, and I see people running up and down, bicycling, walking their dogs. I go, God, I'm so envious. If I could walk a dog right now, I'd be the happiest person alive. But then I go through a thought process, which maybe isn't completely healthy, which is they're not aware of how wonderful it is just to walk a dog, but I'm aware of it. So when I go out in my backyard and I can't walk, and I'm seeing, like, I know this is going to sound really triacly and sentimental, but I see, butterflies or things in my garden, I'm like, whoa, that's incredible, Things like that I couldn't appreciate before because I'm sedentary and I can't move. I have to suddenly pay attention to what's around me, not take it for granted, and find and suck all of the pleasure out of it that I can. So now, when I sit at my desk to write my new book, it's 4 hours because that's all I can stand, maybe 3 sometimes. Those 4 hours are like such bliss for me. I truly appreciate it now because I know that my brain was almost gone, right? So it means so much for me. And to just be alive, is just a wondrous experience. I have a chapter in my new book called Awaken to the Strangeness of Being Alive. And it's about the fact that if you think about it and how unlikely it is that we humans evolved at all, even that we even exist, all the bottlenecks in evolution that we had to pass through, including the disappearance of the dinosaurs and the emergence of mammals. But there are 20 other huge bottlenecks throughout the history of evolution. We had to pass through all of those. We nearly went extinct 80,000 years ago from some virus that infected, there were only 8,000 humans on the planet. All these different things. And here we are with Zoom meetings, et cetera, et cetera. It's like the strangest story you can ever, it's beyond science fiction. But nobody thinks about it. Nobody sits down and goes, God, I'm alive. If you went back to the chain of people that had to connect and have children leading up to your parents, the unlikeliness of you ever being born is astronomical. I mean, unless my science is all wrong, 70,000 generations of people meeting, et cetera, finally ending at your DNA. I mean, unless I'm missing something, it's pretty unlikely. But nobody thinks about it. Well, I certainly think about it now because I almost died. I had nothing else to think about. I have to entertain my brain the way Milton Erickson had to entertain himself by observing people. So it's taken a lot away from me. I can't swim. I'm riding my recumbent bike, which I love, and 80-year-old grandmothers are zipping by me. And I'm like, God damn it, how awful. I'm so envious. My insecurities all well up. But then I realized, hey, I'm like on a boat. I'm sailing. It's wonderful. I'm outside. I have to go through these processes, but I think it's developed me in some way that's in the end very positive.
Sounds like you've had to adjust to a new frame rate on life. Like the old movie had a certain frame rate. This movie has a certain frame rate, but that within that frame rate, there are gifts to be had that you certainly missed in your prior version of self. Is that about right?
Yeah, but also, like, I tell people this, I totally took my life for granted. I was swimming all this time. It was fantastic. I was bicycling. I was traveling. But I never sat back and thought, wow, this is wonderful, how grateful it is. It could be taken away from you. I tell people, don't do that to yourself. I try and teach them. It can be taken away from you tomorrow. When you're out walking the dog, think of me. Think of me.
that drains you of the energy you need for your actual purpose. Everyone has a shadow side. Greene says envy, aggression, grandiosity, and the only question that matters is whether you channel it into something or let an algorithm harvest it for free. Let's watch. Then Greene said something that stopped the conversation cold. How you handle anxiety is the most important quality in life. It'll determine whether you will be successful, whether you will find your career path, or whether you won't. Not intelligence, not talent, not connections. Anxiety tolerance. Greene's logic: anxiety is a signal that you don't understand something yet. Most people can't sit with that discomfort, so they grab the first available answer just to make the feeling stop. It must be the answer because this person said so. The people who build something real do the opposite. They let the anxiety sit, cycle through wrong answers, revise and refine, until an idea goes from what Greene calls dead thinking, something borrowed and unexamined, into a live thinking, something that's actually become their own. If you're anxious for money, he says, you'll make the wrong choices. If you can tolerate the discomfort of not knowing yet, you make the right ones. Let's watch. Robert Greene had a stroke that nearly killed him. What he shared next was the rawest part of the entire conversation. I had to confront the sense that I expected things out of life, and here they're taken away, and I'm ungrateful for being alive. He talks about watching people walk their dogs from his window and feeling a jealousy he's not proud of, followed by a strange, hard-won gratitude for things he never noticed before, like a butterfly in his garden. Greene has a chapter in his upcoming book called Awaken to the Strangeness of Being Alive, built on the idea that the odds of any one of us existing at all, given every evolutionary bottleneck our species barely survived, are so small they're closer to science fiction than biology. Nobody sits down and goes, God, I'm alive, Greene says. I certainly think about it now because I almost died. His warning isn't really about death. It's about the fact that most healthy people are sleepwalking through the exact appreciation he only found after nearly losing everything. And he says you don't need a stroke to access it. You need urgency. Let's watch.
That can't walk a dog and appreciate those things, which I didn't appreciate. So I try and help people in that way when I can, you know.
I think critical message is also to inspire a sense of urgency in people.
Yeah.
You know, I think people hear a sense of urgency and they go, oh God, I'm already under so much pressure. Life's so hard. But we're not talking about a sense of urgency to take on more of what life has to offer. I think we're talking about a sense of urgency to find one's purpose, which takes work and is an ongoing process, but to really get out of modes of apathy, laziness, languishing, and to start, as you've described it, paying deeper attention. I mean, this is a concept that was super important for me to hear about, and I learned about it from you, was how do you get yourself out of a rut? You start paying deeper attention to the things around you and inside you.
Yeah.
And perhaps not coincidentally, you referred to that as, quote, death ground.
Yeah. So it's a strategy from my book. I wrote a book on strategy, my version of the art of war. It's called 33 Strategies of War, but it's really about strategy, the strategic thinking. It's inspired from Sun Tzu, the great Chinese strategist, but it has vast philosophical implications. The idea is, you can almost think of it like barometric pressure. When necessity is pressing in on you, like your back is against the wall, like you have to get something done, and there's like this pressure around you, you find energy in there that you never believed before. William James talks about this, and when he talks about getting a second wind, he explains it very eloquently. When you feel like your life's in danger, suddenly you can leap over things that you never could leap over before. So Sun Tzu says, put an army on death ground and it will fight until it wins. Meaning, put an army with its back to the ocean or a back to the mountain, and it's either win or die. They're going to fight 10 times harder. You're going to find the energy in you that you normally lack when death is facing you in the face, or urgency, or deadlines, or people pressing in on you. When that barometric pressure loosens up and there's none of it, you think you have all the time in the world, you get nothing done. Wow, man, I'm 23. I got all these years ahead of me. I'm going to figure it out, right? I'm not going to die. I got 50, 70, 80 years ahead of me. No, you don't. That pressure now is gone and you're wasting time. You're You're doing all sorts of things that aren't leading to any kind of skill. You're not learning or anything. You need to put yourself on death ground. You need to feel that barometric pressure, which is the actual reality. The actual reality is you could die tomorrow. You could have a stroke tomorrow. You could be fired tomorrow. Everything could fall apart. You need to have that sense of urgency now because that's the reality. You're fooling yourself by thinking you have all of this time. And so when you feel that pressure, suddenly you can move mountains. You have energy. Your life, you just have focus, etc. Neurologically, everything clicks in, and people who've had that experience where they've felt like the ship was going under and they better get their act together and survive, they talk about all these physical processes. I have a story in my new book. I hope I'm not boring you here with all this.
No, but please,
About
quite the opposite.
About a mountain climber who he was climbing this mountain by himself, and he was having a great time, but there was a storm coming and he had to get down, and he suddenly fell and he cut his leg open massively, and there was like a branch sticking in it, and he broke all these bones, and he was gonna die. He was on a ledge. He could see that it was getting dark, and storm clouds were massing. This was in the Rocky Mountains. He was alone, and suddenly he managed to get up on his 2 feet, and he can't explain how, but all of this energy, all this adrenaline started flowing in him. And he said he was like a mountain goat. He was like going down the ledge. He jumped. He was able to kind of get down to another ledge. He got out of it. And for the next 20 years, he was haunted by, how did that happen? I want that feeling again, because it was actually the most ecstatic feeling. I had energy that I never suspected in myself. And so he tries everything to get that feeling back. He tries climbing other mountains. He tries going to Mount Everest. He tries it, and it doesn't come back. And finally, he kind of figures out the formula for it and why it happened. He studies a lot of neuroscience. It's a great book. I'm using it in my new book. It's called Bone Games. It's a very interesting book. A lot of science in it. And he got the feeling back in a smaller sense, but it was the feeling of, your life is in danger. I better get my act together or it's the end. And suddenly adrenaline, dopamine, all the other things were.
Greene ties that urgency back to a concept from his book 33 Strategies of War, pulled from the Chinese strategist Sun Tzu, Death Ground. Sun Tzu says, put an army on death ground and it will fight until it wins, meaning put an army with its back to the ocean or its back to a mountain, and it's either win or die. They're going to fight 10 times harder. Greene compares it to barometric pressure. When your back is against the wall, you find energy you didn't know you had. When that pressure disappears and you think you have all the time in the world, you get nothing done. He tells the story of a mountain climber alone in the Rockies who shattered his leg on a ledge with a storm closing in, and somehow adrenaline took over and got him down safely. For 20 years afterward, that climber chased that feeling, trying to understand the surge of energy that saved his life. Greene's conclusion, the actual reality is you could die tomorrow. You need to feel that barometric pressure, because that's the reality. You're fooling yourself by thinking you have all this time. You don't need a mountain or a stroke to put yourself on death ground. You need to stop pretending you have unlimited time to become who you're supposed to be. Let's watch. Let me bring this together. Robert Greene spent over 3 hours with Andrew Huberman, and underneath 5 completely different topics: power, attention, anxiety, mortality, and urgency. There's one single thread. Almost everything that controls your life is invisible until you decide to look directly at it. The power dynamics in every relationship you have, the algorithm engineering your outrage, the anxiety you're running from instead of sitting with, the time you're assuming you'll always have. Greene's entire body of work, from the 48 laws of power to the laws of human nature to mastery, is really one argument said 5 different ways. The people who look directly at what everyone else looks away from are the ones who end up actually living the life they wanted. That is it for today's episode of The Human Code. Smash that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment. Which one of these 5 hit you hardest? Power, attention, anxiety, mortality, or urgency? I will see you in the next one.